The genius. He did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. For the half of a century no mortal has disturbed them. In pace requiescat. Jennifer McCarthy woke up with dreams of him in her mind, as his taste on her lips. She had never kissed him, but she was imaginative. She had to be, because she knew her love for him was like most things in life, forlorn and unobtainable. She easily came to this conclusion by analyzing her social status in comparison with his and her weight. She had learned not to pull any punches when it came to her weight. She weighed about as much as him, and he was about a foot taller than her. She was a nerd and he was a jock. There was no way that they could Romeo and Juliet this. Besides, both characters commit suicide in that play. She had stayed on the outskirts of the social scene and never even thought about putting herself out there. Instead of using her considerable intelligence to see the strengths of her and those around her, Jenny used her mind to bring other people, and herself, down. As a result of all this, she had little friends and even less self-respect. Like many during their teenage years before her, she subscribed herself to a very gothic stance. She was pessimistic and fatalistic, whereas most youth grow out of this phase. She was certain to carry it with her as long as she lived. She had been hurt too much, and knew by not caring and hurting those around her, she would be certain never to feel the same pain twice. Jenny was the first one to wake up. She glanced over at Patrick and realized that even when he wasn't sleeping, he exuded something that was magnetic to her. She wasn't sure if it was her desire to hurt herself or maybe the battery of teenage comedies she watched, but she knew that she was attracted to him. She looked around the room at all her classmates sleeping on the floor or propped up against walls, some used jackets or the backpacks as pillows. She realized something was missing in all of this. It took her a few minutes to shake off the drowsiness that had overtaken her. It dawned on her the second she looked at the large desk. She stood up and asked, "Where'd the teacher go?" The class woke up quickly as the commotion rose. Theories came out quickly and without much evidence to back them up. Andrew claimed the government soldiers took her whilst she slept to experiment on her. She wasn't sure if he really believed that or if he just said it to spook some of the other students. Jennifer suggested that she'd abandon them to go run off for safety. She proposed the idea in common sense, but she could sense the class's outright and fearful rejection of the thought. Joey decided she had gone to use the bathroom. Everyone else seemed to pick sides and stick to the authenticity that theirs was the right idea. The theories continued to spin out of control until almost everyone was shouting at each other. The argument turned uglier and uglier until Jonas interrupted everyone, not with words, but by merely tapping on the window. The 10 students, including Jonas, went to the window to look out at the barricade. He had something important to tell them all, but he still hadn't found his voice. In her free time, she had read many books on psychoanalysis, and she had decided that Jonas had social anxiety disorder. During the night, the barricade had swollen and looked even more formidable. The soldiers' ranks had expanded as well. Now the chain-link fence was reinforced with sandbags for the soldiers to take cover behind, and 3 tents had sprung up. It was a disheartening sign. But what was even more discouraging was seeing the teacher step outside of the lobby and begin to approach the barricade. Jennifer snarled. "That settles it. She's leaving us behind." The class watched spellbound as their calculus teacher raised her hands and shouted, "I'm not infected! Those kids are not infected! You can't keep us locked up in there! At the very least, we need food and water!" The soldiers commanded,
"Go back inside! We will use deadly force to keep you inside the quarantine!"
She continued approaching, ignoring their mandates. They all raised their guns, and she was in the crosshairs of every weapon in the vicinity. The teacher shouted, "I demand to see who's in charge here! You can't do this to us! We're human!" A single shot rang out, and the class watched horrified as a splash of red materialized behind their teacher. She pressed her hand to her stomach, unable to accept what had just happened. She pulled her hand back and stared in terror at the red liquid oozing between her fingers. The single shot galvanized the other soldiers into action. She had just enough time to look up mystified at the other soldiers before every finger found their triggers. A volley of bullets burst from the collective mass of guns and tore through her. She rocked back a few steps as she was cut to ribbons. She collapsed onto her back and stopped moving. A pool of red spread out beneath her. Almost every student either cried out or shrieked in terror. They got as far away from the window as possible, and when everyone was out of the line of fire, they broke into panic. Boys and girls alike wept openly. Andrew clenched his fists so hard that his nails cut into his palms. Geraldo hid his face behind an impressive mask, but anyone could tell he was deeply disturbed by the teacher's death. Patrick Finnegan gritted his teeth and punched the painted cinderblock wall in rage. He got in 10 punches before he dissolved into a coughing fit. The slacker took it probably the hardest. He screamed aloud with such pain that for a second Jennifer thought that he had caught a stray bullet. Those who weren't crying were in shock. They looked into nothingness with a stare that really saw nothing. She wondered if they had gone into a catatonic state. She became aware that her vision had gone blurry and couldn't figure out why. She wiped at her eyes and they came away wet.
Am I crying? When did that start?
She broke down in sobs that racked her body. The girl next door.
When God closes a door, she opens a window.
Harriet was trying her best to think on the bright side of things, but there weren't many things to be optimistic about. They had just executed a teacher without remorse, and these were the people that had them on lockdown. The slightest misstep could result in all of them ending up like her. She crept close to the window and poked her head out. The soldiers were scrambling around and talking frantically on the radio. A man was hurriedly jamming his feet into what looked like a mass of yellow.
A hazmat suit?
Soldiers swept their guns all over the campus, as if they expected everyone to come running out at them. She knew that no one had that thought. They probably wanted to get as far away from the soldiers as possible. She watched as a man made his way to the barricade. He was dressed differently from the soldiers. He didn't have any camouflage. He was wearing something a colonel or general would be wearing. There were a few medals pinned on his jacket that would inspire confidence or trust with them. She rightfully assumed that he was in some sort of position of power. He looked at the window of classroom 300 for a few seconds before he raised a megaphone up to his mouth and set the tone of dialogue.
I will only speak to one person. This does not have to be a clusterfuck of shouting. You have 3 minutes to select someone.
He set the megaphone down and turned to the soldiers and began to talk to them. The class looked at one another. Jonas was not a wise choice, nor Andrew. Joseph looked too forlorn to be an eligible choice. Everyone else was up for selection. Eddie broke the silence.
I vote Harriet. Why me?
Talkative, pretty cheerful.
I don't feel very peppy.
He continued. Femininity might help diffuse some of us and their attention. Andrew spat.
Think she might be able to seduce him, flash him a little bit of titty.
Lou intervened. I second the choice. Jonas simply nodded and Joey said through red-rimmed eyes, You're the best choice in this situation. Harriet nodded and joked.
No pressure, right?
Michaela said.
Only the pressure of getting us all killed. Watch your mouth and make sure he knows I'm important.
She knew that Michaela had something against her, but she never could figure out what it was. The decision had been made.
They just want the pressure off their shoulders.
She walked to the window slowly. Her knees threatened to buckle under her weight, as she was almost certain her heart would beat out of her chest. The leader was waiting behind the chain-link fence and the barricade looking at an old pocket watch impatiently. She assumed that he was wishing that they had finished their deliberations in a timely manner. But you can't rush perfection. She shouted,
My name is Harriet Patricia Wagner. I'm a student here and I live at...
He spoke through the megaphone, cutting her off.
We know who you all are. I'm here to explain what's happening.
Chatter broke out throughout the class before she continued.
Tell us why we're under quarantine then. Tell us who you are and the reason for all this.
He looked directly at her for a second. She felt as though his eyes were boring through her and looking at something behind her. The class had gathered around her, but mostly stayed out of sight for fear of a bullet finding them should they start flying. The man with the megaphone began.
From best I can tell, there's been a biological incident.
Andrew Wakefield popped out from behind the shelves like a damn jack-in-the-box and shouted what he saw at the man hiding behind the barricade.
Incident? Why don't you just call it fucking whoopsie-daisy? We're fucking surrounded like Butch Cassidy by soldiers with assault rifles, and you're trying to downplay it. Was it also an incident when you lit up our calculus teacher like a goddamn Christmas tree? You must be a stupid motherfucker if you think we're gonna eat this bullshit hook, line, and sinker.
Everyone's breath caught in their throats. They knew that nothing good would come from instigating this man. Other students restrained Andrew before he could launch into any more invectives. He continued without batting an eye.
The classroom directly below you was exposed. Do not worry about them, they are being given the best medical care and will be back on their feet soon enough. Until the time we can identify the biological entity, you guys are all on quarantine. Do not try to leave the school. You're free to use the restroom on the 3rd floor, but are not allowed to visit the other floors.
Harriet replied,
There are no restrooms on this floor.
I suggest designating a nearby classroom as a bathroom then. Tomorrow we'll send in doctors to treat you all and provide food. It is our duty to make sure everyone gets out of this alive.
Joseph Meister, the slacker. I am the wind. I am constantly moving and carrying my burdens with finesse. The man set the megaphone down on a concrete block that composed part of the ever-growing barricade and walked away. He was finished talking and cut the communications without so much as a goodbye. Everyone turned away from the window, and Michaela was the first to speak.
That's good news, right? We're gonna be alright?
Geraldo joined in.
They have the situation under control. Gracias a Dios.
Good for you. He's fucking us and you're optimistic that he ain't gonna come in our mouths and get none in our hair.
Geraldo was about to punch his lights out when Jonas startled everyone. Jonas grabbed a desk and overturned it. Silence settled in the room like a miasma. Jennifer snapped.
What the hell was that, social butterfly?
Eddie spoke up for him.
He knows. How can you provide treatment for an illness if you can't even identify it? They lied to us about treating Classroom 200. What else are they lying to us about? I don't think we can trust them.
Harriet countered.
Maybe they don't know and they're just trying to keep us calm until they can come take blood samples and whatnot.
Patrick coughed and spoke.
We can't know anything for sure until they show up tomorrow.
Jennifer snapped her fingers loudly and said,
We don't have to wait.
She walked over to the vent and shouted,
How you doing down there? Copacetic?
She waited for a reply, but heard nothing. She shouted,
We just wanted to know if you had a bunch of doctors treating all you guys. You heard the douche. We just figured it was a bunch of BS, but it never hurts to follow up.
Again, there was no response. The class was getting worried now. She shouted again.
Can you hear me, you bunch of chatty Cathys?
She pried off the lid and stuck her head into the hole to make herself better heard. It was there that she first became aware of the smell. She pulled her head back and wrinkled her nose in disgust.
This school's fallen apart. Something must have died in the vents. What did I expect going to a public school here?
Jonas's hands clenched into a ball and he gritted his teeth as the realization made itself known to him. Edward was the next to put the pieces into place and said,
Oh, sweet Jesus.
Jennifer raised her eyebrow quizzically, and then the implications set on her.
They couldn't have. We would have heard. What's going on?
Said Michaela.
Dunno myself, but it seems like the genius got a whiff of something that wasn't a fried double down. My guess is on the scent of decomposition.
The rest of the class didn't have to go near the vent. The rest of the class didn't have to get near the vent to become aware of the smell. Now that the vent cover had been taken off, and someone had called attention to it, they could all smell it. Andrew continued talking to no one in particular.
I guess it makes sense. The guy with the megaphone was only addressing us. I bet the class below us has gone to the great big gig in the sky with the help of those soldiers.
Lou spoke aloud.
Well, what now?
Edward answered.
This may be a horrible suggestion, but why don't we have a look-see to try and find out what happened? We won't know for sure until that's what we can see with our own eyes.
His right hand keeps tracking back to his pocket. A talisman or lucky charm? Given the situation in which he touches his pocket indicates some sort of weapon. Mace or knife? The class looked at their fellow student as if he had made a modest proposal. Andrew concurred.
This may be the Stockholm Syndrome talking, but that is the sexiest idea I've heard since we got locked up.
Edward corrected. I'm not your captor, so you wouldn't be developing feelings for me, but the soldiers.
And the magic's gone, you're back to being annoying.
Geraldo resisted the idea.
What happens if the soldiers notice that we're gone? We could be in serious trouble.
Jonas noticed his hand wandered. Lou reasoned.
We won't send everyone. Maybe 2 or 3.
The rest will keep an eye out and maybe forage for food because I am starving over here. The group embraced the idea, but when it came to electing themselves into the research party, they fell short. They eventually decided on Andrew, who volunteered out of the sheer desire to break the general's orders, and with Jenna and Louis Pasteur. Jonas, Patrick, and Michaela would watch the soldiers and shout down the vent if they saw them approaching the school. The rest would go through to the other classrooms in search of food, as most hadn't eaten anything for a day. They all split off to perform their tasks. At first, Jonas watched the soldiers, looking for a pattern or habit to become evident, but at such distance he couldn't make out anyone's faces, and without any identifying features he was forced to give up. He turned his attention to those in the classroom with him. Patrick coughed frequently. He probably had a cold, which had been compounded by the stress of the situation. Michaela kept glancing out towards the town, and he knew she was waiting for the time when her dad would show up with a legion of lawyers. He didn't bother to tell her that no amount of legal intervention would help them if they pulled up with martial law card. The group that had been searching the other classrooms on the 3rd floor came back and deposited their collection on the teacher's desk. Jennifer rationalized. Most kids took their bags with them when they left. We have slim pickings here. She's avoiding eye contact, a guilty conscience about something. He knew that she had pocketed a bit of her findings. He didn't see any reason in calling her out on it, as doing so would only serve to increase paranoia and threaten the cohesion of the group. Harriet said, This should tide us over for the day, and we can always raid the lunchrooms and lockers if this lasts another day. Everyone just needs to tighten their belts a little bit. She knows how important it is for everyone to be calm and optimistic. She'll be extremely important if this quarantine persists. The 3-man search party had returned, and Jonas knew what they had found before they began talking. Eddie looked paler than a porcelain doll, and Lou couldn't hold anyone's eyes for more than a second. They don't want to talk about it, but they know what has to be done. Even Andrew seemed dejected, as if even he didn't want to talk about what they had seen directly below them. The others had been excited by the prospect of finally getting something in their stomachs other than air and hadn't noticed the pallor or miasmic depression that clung to those 3. Patrick showed them the food they had collected, mainly granola bars, candy, and water bottles. Jonas knew that food was the last thing on their minds at the moment. Louis broke the news to everyone.
They're all dead downstairs. Every single one of them.
Silence reigned supreme amongst the class. Ed continued.
Most of them looked like they aspirated blood or were bleeding from their mouths, nose, and eyes. They were showing symptoms similar to hemorrhagic.
They don't want to hear about that shit. We didn't hang out there for long for obvious reasons, but it seemed like they all died of the same thing. There were no signs that doctors had been present or any treatment was given.
There was no response. The class absorbed this news like it was reading off a lunch menu, and not the violent death of a class of students just feet away from them. Jonas processed the information carefully. The girl who spoke to them through the vents had implied that only one of them had taken the pills. But if everyone was dead, that suggested that the biological entity was infectious on some level, whether it was contracted through bodily fluids or aerosolized. Jonas couldn't be sure. The illness, if left untreated, could be fatal. One sign of infection was severe bleeding, but panic could trigger a whole myriad of placebo symptoms. Patrick's persistent cough could lead to severe fractioning of the group if tensions rise any higher. Jonas knew that something had to be done to diffuse the tension in the class before paranoia began to influence everyone's actions. The miasma that had started with those 3 investigators suffused throughout the room. Students were dead below them, and some knew them as friends or at least acquaintances. Jonas knew one of them, but he kept that to himself mostly. For the others, however, Michaela bit her lip and looked down at the floor to keep herself from crying.
A crush, maybe?
Andrew snapped.
God damn it.
Geralda's hand shifted but returned back to his side. The realization that this room may quickly become their tomb had not escaped anyone's mind. Harriet's voice broke through the murk.
I would kill for a drink right about now.
It was then that Jonas spoke for the first time, since everyone was put on lockdown.